Welcome to the show where the new Bionicle toys hit in the shelves, where the rare mask in your LEGO collection, where the meat in your Bionicle sandwich. Welcome to the Bionicle Inspiration series, where we showcase MOCs from the community to inspire you to make some cool stuff yourself. So this week's theme is Visorak. You might of course remember the Visorak. If you head on over to old buddy Biosector, it says the Visorak are spider-like Rahi that once made up a large portion of the Brotherhood of Makuta's army. And they had their own wave of LEGO sets, and they were some pretty fun sets. So let's take a look at a bunch of different Visorak MOCs. So maybe you want to revamp a Visorak, or you want to take a stab at a Visorak MOC. Well, let's get some ideas as to how we could do so. So the first Visorak that we've got today is by Vorad03, and it's called Visorak Unorak. Unorak. That was the name of the Black Visorak set. Probably pronouncing that wrong. I never really learnt the names of the Visorak. My bad. Besides the point though, this is a fantastic Visorak revamp. Probably one of my favorites that I have in this episode actually. I love the fact that Vorad's given him some smaller legs here. I think that's kind of fitting and surprisingly nice. You take a look at the actual Visorak sets, a lot of them just had kind of basic prefab limb elements there. Whereas this one adds a little bit more armor to it. And the fact that it's a bit shorter, to me, actually seems to be adding a little bit more detail, makes it look a little bit more realistic. Now, I know Visorak don't actually exist in the real world, but they obviously take a bit of inspiration from bugs and things. So I think having that little lift arm there that kind of adds in the tip of those legs there, or claws, or feet, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. I think it just looks a little bit more well-rounded, you know? I think it's nice, especially too, you take a look at the back legs here, using some of these wedge pieces here, these system wedge plates, just to add a little bit more detail to it, just to round out some of the gaps. It's a really nice little addition there, but it does a lot for it. I think it's really, really nice. Let's take a look at kind of the underside, kind of under the main Visorak headpiece, kind of the main body area. Vorad's added a whole bunch of different things there, just kind of pad it out a little bit more, give it a bit more depth, give it a little bit more oomph, for lack of a better term. And I quite like that, because you look at the set again, that was kind of a hollow area there. You know, you had to make room for a lot of the mechanics with the spinning shooter pieces there that were on the back. But actually kind of adding in that a little bit more kind of makes the head look more well-rounded. Again, this Visorak revamp kind of makes it look more complete, more realistic. And I really, really like that. There's little tiny things that he's done and just sort of filled in gaps. I think filling in gaps is always a really kind of semi-crucial thing to do, depending on your style and depending on how you want to build. But I think doing that, filling in gaps, can make things look a lot more realistic. I think this is a good example of that. I also like the fact he gave him different pincers to how the pincers were in the actual set here. It's just kind of nice to see, you know. I always like when people do that with like Rachi or something. They give them a different element for the staff. So it's not what the original set had, but it's something different, and it, you know, because you're doing a revamp, you can add a little bit of creative license there, change things up, see how it looks. And I think it works really well here. Those kind of spiked blade pieces work really well as pincers and work even better on a sort of Visorak bug, Beetle kind of look. It's really nice. One thing that Vorad mentions here on the post on mock pages is something I never really knew about. How do I pronounce his name again? I gotta read it. Unorak. This specific Black Visorak, he actually has the power of imitating voices, which is actually a really cool little ability. I like that. So I kind of recommend you do that if you want. Like I was saying before, old buddy Biosector, the old Bionicle wiki. Head on over there, research some of the characters that were sets, and you might learn fun stuff like that. Like, oh hey, they had the power to imitate voices. What a cool ability. So it's pretty cool. So Vorad, you've done a good job on this one. On to the next one. This is by an old buddy of mine, Mr. LegoBob29. And this is called Insect the Visorak Prince. And just on the title alone, I like the idea of having a Visorak prince. I don't know what that means. That just sounds cool. King of the bugs. It's not the most glamorous title, but, you know, you've got an army of like, 1,000, 1,000,000 odd bugs. That's probably a good army to have and to be the prince of. I like it. So that's something, of course, you could do as well, is how can you expand on the lore, whether it's Visorak lore or any other form of Bionicle lore. Can you make a character or a concept that expands upon it in some way, and you develop a cool character, you develop a bit of a fun story out of it. Nothing wrong with that. So this kind of takes the concept of Visorak and takes it to a different level. You're putting a Visorak headpiece or body piece, whatever you want to refer to it as. It is a large piece there, but having it be the head on a humanoid character instead. It's a different way of approaching it, and yeah, it's pretty cool. And he more or less has just put the head there on a sort of basic, simple Anika frame there. But it looks nice. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's cool. It's a really unique way of doing it, because it's kind of thinking outside the box, you know? That is a Visorak body headpiece, right? And you might not look at it in any other perspective or any other way. But in reality, you could use it as a headpiece like this, or you could use it as a thigh armor piece, or something for a body, or maybe some shields on a toe or something, or just a sort of part of a larger body element on a Titan or something like that. You could use this piece in a whole variety of different ways, and don't forget to do that. Think outside the box with how you can use pieces. Stare at them for a little bit and go, what does this look like? What could I use this as? And then your nice part usages will just appear in front of you. It's very helpful in that regard. Also got a pretty cool sword here using those wing pieces like that. Kind of does look a bit like some sort of like scimitar or sword there. It's quite nice. So yeah, a different way of approaching using a Visorak head there. I quite like that. But there is another sort of more humanoid Visorak character here that one Dan the Biomocker Dan has made. And I quite like this one as well. So again, just another way of approaching the same sort of concept. A very similar idea. But this one's a little bit more custom. It's less of the Anika frame and it's getting more of a custom torso. And some really cool hands as well, using some of these Horde Connect pieces as fingers, sort of in a similar vein to Axon. It's pretty cool. So I like the idea of having these really big, bulky hands and this really big, bulky head. It's kind of keeping everything in proportion there and kind of coming up with this, I imagine, some sort of cool new race. It's pretty cool. I don't think I said before, this mock is just called Visorak, but you would have read that before. Yeah, overall, this guy's pretty cool. It's a very similar concept to the last one, but just a different way of approaching it. And I always think that's a good thing to remember as well, is there's always a different way of doing something, or different ways of approaching it, whether it's a more custom-heavy viewpoint, or a less custom-heavy viewpoint, and going more your prefab limb pieces, or a basic simple Anika build, or whatever. So think about the way you want to approach a creation, and if it's not working the way that you're doing, remember there's a more simple or more advanced or completely different way of looking at it that could help you kind of fix the problem you might currently have. So there you go. The next one we got today is by Ian Barreto and is called Chippy Visorak. And these are simply just Chippy Visorak, the little itty bitty tiny Visorak, which is cute and adorable. I love it. So he's used some smaller limb elements here, as well as these tiny itty bitty pincers as well. So he really has effectively managed to make a Visorak just a lot smaller, just by looking at the pieces that are just kind of smaller versions of what it originally had, you know, getting smaller blade elements instead of the larger ones. And then it kind of accomplishes the job that you're looking to do. There's nothing wrong with doing that, making kind of chibi versions of characters that, you know, maybe you've made, or chibi versions of actual sets as well. Just kind of find the parts that look like really just smaller versions of what it had before, you know. Look to like a Matoran or something, some of the Matoran sets, some of just the smaller sets, and go, okay, these smaller limb elements or these smaller weapon pieces could look a bit like a smaller version of this larger piece on this Titan guy or something. And it can always be a fun challenge, just a cute thing to do, you know, just to make a little itty bitty mock. Nothing wrong with that. And you're using less pieces if you're doing that as well. So you know, if you're running out of pieces, you don't have enough parts to make something, maybe just build something a little bit smaller, and then that way you can kind of use what you've got more effectively. But yeah, really subtle changes here that have made them really cute and fun. Just a different approach to it. I like that. The next one here is by Diego Corridera and is called Rahi Pulse Beetle. So this one isn't actually a Visorak, but it kind of looks like a Visorak, so I'm just going to talk about it anyway. So this one's a lot more heavily modified than what we saw before, adding in a whole bunch of different legs, which is great. I kind of like that idea too, of just getting a Visorak and just kind of armoring it up and adding different legs to it, giving it 7 eyes, and just going ham on making it look nothing like it originally did and taking it to an entirely different place. Maybe putting a different twist on it, making it like it's set 20 years in the future or something weird like that. You never know what kind of cool stuff you could get with it. So I always love those sort of revamps where it takes it to an entirely different place. This is a cool example of that, even though it's not technically a Visorak, but you know, whatever. There's a little bit of CCBS parts used here as well, which looks quite nice and flows very nicely with some of the other textures and colors and things here. I also like the fact that he's got this giant like arc reactor on his back, like with the little edits that he's done here. His eyes are glowing, and this sort of like engine thing on its back is also glowing. Kind of looks like Iron Man, like an arc reactor, like I was saying before. So this is the Iron Rack, the Iron Man Visorak Iron Rack. I like that. Maybe that's something you could also do, is build Iron Man in Visorak form. I cracked myself up at my own joke, but it's a cool idea. One little detail that I really like, we take a look at sort of kind of closer to where the eyes are on the Visorak headpiece. There's a silver Borak weapon piece that's been used. That specific Borak weapon, I believe, came on the green Borak, one of the green Borak sets. And naturally, it's kind of just in this sort of C shape, kind of like the letter C. And so it kind of has this natural gap in it. So he's managed to kind of wrap it around where the leg comes out. It looks really, really nice. And I love how he's done that, kind of played with the natural gaps in the parts and finding ways of having things come out of it so that it kind of creates, it kind of covers up certain gaps and just creates a really nice sort of flow between one area of the creation into the next. It's really, really cool. Really nice way of playing with your pieces there. So yeah, super cool Visorak that's not really a Visorak. I like it. The next one here is by Ao Okononen and is called Vaisakhi. So this one has really, really slight adjustments again, but I actually think it does quite a lot. You know, it's more or less the basic body and limbs of your typical Visorak, but the actual kind of pincers in black here changed up quite a fair bit. I think these, specifically the black elements, which is what we'll focus on for now, really helps it to look a lot more menacing, kind of a lot more spider-like. Kind of takes the Visorak away from what it originally looks like and starts to put it more into like a horror setting or just more of a kind of more darker look to it. It kind of makes it look a little bit more like a spider and less kind of like some kind of crazy stag beetle or something. So I like that. It's a little bit more menacing. You're getting a different atmosphere kind of being communicated with these pieces here. It's cool. I also like just the simple inclusion of a dish piece there on the back where the spinner thing would normally be on the Visorak, because, you know, the spinners were actually really cool. They're probably one of my favorite kind of play features on a Bionicle, because those things went super high and would always touch the roof. It was great. But sometimes you don't want that kind of play feature on the set, and you just want to kind of get rid of it because it's just getting in the way, or you just don't want it. It's just that simple idea of just removing all of those spinner elements and just putting a dish on the back there just to kind of cover that area up. It looks really nice, really effective. It's a really simple solution, but it really rounds that area off and makes it look nice. That's the thing too, Visorak seem to be a little bit harder to revamp, especially just there's one more mock after this, but that's something I found with this episode is I was like, I want to do an episode on Visorak. I was really surprised with there wasn't actually a lot of Visorak mocks out there. And I found as well that every single one of them specifically used the Visorak body piece. And I kind of thought like, hey, I would have thought people would have done some kind of crazy like system version of the Visorak headpiece, or, you know, taken the Visorak concept but like flipped it on its head and given it like 7 eyes and 20 pincers. And, you know, you see some, the Borok episode that we did, there were some Borok examples there that were really, really custom and totally different to how the actual Borok set looked, and took the concept but advanced it. And I'm amazed that hasn't happened with Visorak. So hopefully if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna build a Visorak, then see how you can take it to a really different degree, because just from what I've seen with these, I think there's 7 mocks in this episode, it seems to be a little bit more of a difficult thing to revamp and to play around with, and it's just not something people have done. Everyone's still built really good stuff, but it's just interesting to note how they've built it. But there's a little subtle addition on this creation here, kind of going back to the mock here. Just a simple addition of these more sort of spider-like menacing legs. It's a really, really simple thing, but it's done a lot to it. I think the subtle changes is always something that's important, you know. Whether you're revamping a mock or a set or whatever, little subtle changes sometimes can be the perfect approach to totally reinventing something. You don't always need to invest heaps of time, money, energy, and parts into something to make it look super, super cool. Little subtle changes can really, really make you look at a mock and just go, man, that's awesome. I didn't do much to it, but I made it look 12 times cooler. So yeah, have a think about that. Final mock here. This one is by Aaron Zambayasi and is called Bergerac Visorak Revamp. I like his little description here. He says boredom plus spare parts equals this. So there you go. If you're feeling a little bored, you got some spare parts lying around, may as well make something with them. Regardless, this one uses a little bit of Hero Factory into it, and I think this example here specifically, those Hero Factory CCBS construction parts, whatever you want to call them, they flow really, really well into your typical Visorak look here. Just the textures and just the general shape and size of them just flows very nicely with the rest of the aesthetic. I just really like it. And again, that's what I was saying before, you know, with construction and stuff, you don't see any construction Visorak. If some exist, please point me in the direction of them, but I couldn't see them when I did my research for this episode here. But yeah, man, put some CCBS into your Visorak. I think it'd be pretty cool. And by all means, if you're listening to this and you're like, alright, Cossy, challenge accepted, I'm going to make some custom Visorak that are, you know, system-built Visorak bodies or some crazy 3D printed Visorak headpiece, and I'm going to give it 20 legs and 40 pincers, and a Matoran's going to be riding it. I hope you accept that challenge, because that sounds rad. If you do it, please send it my way, and I'll do a Visorak number 2 episode. I'll do a part 2 to this one, and we'll touch upon some more heavily customized Visorak and some different approaches to it. I'm calling you out, EP. Do a Visorak collab. You heard me, Mitch. you're probably watching. I don't know. Let's make it happen. Anyway, besides the point, that's it for this Visorak episode. Really cool Visorak MOCs here. I think we've discussed some pretty cool concepts as well. Hopefully they help you with your Visorak revamps or any of your other revamps or any of the other MOCs that you're making. And if you do have a Visorak that you want to submit or anything that you want to submit, you can do so through the submission email that you're currently seeing on your screen. It's also in the description below, so if you want to copy paste that into an email, then you can submit your stuff. In the email, just include a couple pictures, any other information you want. Send it my way, and one day it'll appear in the show. Also, links in the description to all the MOCs that you saw in today's episode. Those people are really talented. They make some great stuff. You should check out the other things that they've made, or even head over to the posts, maybe leave a comment on their stuff. Give them some love. Give those guys a follow, because they make cool stuff. You may as well see the other things that they make. Also, links in the description to my social media, where you may in fact see me posting some Visorak revamps, or some other revamps of some other sets and things on my social media. I got my Instagrams, my Facebooks, my Flickrs, all sorts of different stuff. You can check out my going-ons and other things over on there. That's it, though, for today. Happy building. Hope you're having a great day, and I hope you get to building some Visorak. See you next episode, guys. Bye for now.